Welcome to the Chefofx podcast.
So this is on your website?
It is on my website.
I never been on it. I'm sorry about that.
No, it doesn't matter.
I don't know if you shared a link with me before and it was like I read some stuff on it, but I don't know if you shared the one with the podcast on it actually.
Well, the way I develop things is kind of like, it's not, since they all developed independently, so I do a lot of different art forms. And one of them is a podcast. But then another one is just abstract, like graphic design. And then another one is rapping, hip-hop stuff. And then another one is, I think that's all of them. But the website, the purpose of the website is just to have all that stuff in one place.
And what about the like poetry or the writing?
Writing is similar to hip-hop. Oh, writing, same thing. So with writing, I just post that on the website too. And I have hip-hop lyrics on the website. So if it's poetry, it's probably hip-hop lyrics. And if it's writing, just straight up writing like the Dome story, then I can just post it on the website if I want. But I think I took that off the website.
Now I feel like I'm the one interviewing you.
It's more like a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, there's a little bit on both sides. So
what got you into doing like podcasts?
I was, so when I first wanted to do one, I wanted to do a STEM podcast because I went to a black college. And all my friends were like super geeky like me, and they were all black people, so we were all kind of unicorns.
Where at?
Alabama. It's called Tuskegee University. I call it Ruskegee University.
What is it again? How do you pronounce it?
How do I, or what's the correct pronunciation?
The correct or the normal.
It's Tuskegee University.
Tuskegee.
Yes.
Am I pronouncing it right?
E-G.
Tuskegee.
Yeah. It's more like Tuskegee.
What's the history behind it? I've always been curious because recently, I don't know if you saw, I don't know how recent it was, but in Vice, they had this piece. I don't know if you got to see it. It was like an all-black university.
I didn't see the piece.
And it was about like basically a white guy being in there and how the students
how they treated him.
Yeah, well, obviously they show. Well, I don't know how. Obviously, I heard about them, but I never been to one or experienced one.
A black university.
Yeah, and so when I saw it on Vice, I'm like, this is pretty dope. You know, this is interesting.
Yeah.
And then I saw like they had, at least in the Vice thing, they had these images of our previous, basically their black founders as they call it. And they looked beautiful, and it was like very decorated. Everybody was well dressed. Yeah, it seemed like really fun. I'm like, dang, I got a little jealous. I was like, what about the Hispanic bros? Where's the all brown university or whatever you want to call us, right?
We have Brown University, but there are very few brown people attending.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, well, I don't know too much of the history, but long story short, I know for Tuskegee, it was founded by an ex-slave, Booker T. Washington, whose central focus was more on practical learning so that you can build more of an economic base, if I'm interpreting him correctly.
What is practical learning from other type of learning? Like what is?
Yeah, so I would say the two basic schools of thought are learning for its own sake and learning to do a job. And he was more in the camp of learning to do a job, if I'm interpreting him correctly.
Kind of like, correct me if I'm wrong, like not only learning the concepts, but kind of like how to apply them.
Yeah,
basically,
applied, applied versus theoretical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. That's interesting.
So I believe he was more of a fan of the applied.
So it was more like basically STEM stuff, right?
Well,
I'm assuming?
I majored in a STEM major, but I'd say it was, I don't know in general. I don't know in general what it was like.
That's interesting.
All I know is my little mini experience.
I wonder what if, after seeing the Vice documentary, the little mini documentary, more like, it's like a kind of, I don't feel like it's a full-fledged documentary, but because I still had way more questions, like not everything was kind of answered. I started wondering like how would I fit in like the grand scope of things? Because being Hispanic minority, my assumption is that I would fit in. Not 100% well, but like kind of get we're in the same boat, kind of grew, understand each other. That it would be me, like I would be able to wiggle in and just and hang out with
Sneak on in, yeah.
No, not sneak, but like, you know, there's this word in Spanish which is convivir, which just means to I don't know sometimes I'm like bad at Spanish, but convivir is like
how dare you? How dare you?
Yeah, no, it means more like the way I interpret it is like convivir is like living with each other, like, you know, like being family, you know, like you share the same resources, experiences,
like the domes.
Yeah, or what it's supposed to be, you know.
Well, that's it right there. Is that no matter where you go, you're gonna find some cool people.
Yeah.
But you can't expect just because it's a black college that everybody's gonna be down for the same cause of that you're interested in, or even that they're gonna be well aligned with each other.
I would hope. At least that's what my image is like. I would love to go to this one place and everybody's like super happy, all jolly with each other, and like and open to sharing ideas and beliefs, cultures, and kind of like trying to make a better future, or at least attempt, you know?
Well, everyone wants a utopia.
Yeah.
But they don't exist.
I know that obviously with art we were learning about like postmodernism. How once we got to that era.
What is postmodernism?
Postmodern, I know the smart ass one would be like after modern.
Modern.
But no, it's like at least from my understanding, you know, I'm not even though I got a minor. You are
a graduate. You just graduated with an art something.
Yeah, with a minor in art and art history. And
you make good art. You make quality art.
Thank you so much.
I don't know.
Did we already start on this or no?
Well, if you want. If not, then no.
Yeah. I was like, oh, we were recording now. But yeah, at least my interpretation is like with art history, like I know I'm an art major. This is gonna sound shitty. With art history, it's like sometimes it just feels boring. I would rather be doing something than listening of all this stuff.
You would be in Booker T. Washington's camp then.
Maybe, yeah. I would be hanging out with him. Yeah. I'll be real cool. But I do have to see the value in art history, and then they show you these different things. At least what I remember with postmodernism, obviously don't quote me on this, is like stuff looked way more darker and stuff like that. And at least kind of like if you look at the grand history of things, that stuff started coming out like after World War II, you know, after the nuclear bombs went off in Japan.
What kind of ideas were they pursuing that was different from the last era? Why is it like a new era?
I think it's just like, it's kind of scary, like in a way, because when you're looking at some of this postmodern stuff, it's like people kind of realize that this whole utopia thing is never gonna happen, and the reason why, it's not like they're trying to be emo or bummed out. They're trying to see things in a more realistic light, and they know that now that we have achieved a way to wipe out as many humans as we can within like less than a second with a nuclear bomb. If we have that type of technology, utopia can't exist at all, because anyone out there that kind of has access to that type of thing, like there's always going to be like this underlying fear. Mm-hmm. And obviously, you know, the Cold War, it was just full of that stuff. It was people, even today, we keep on talking about like North Korea missile, that and that. And it's like, and everybody's like, okay, when is it going to happen? And there's like this kind of things are tense, you know?
Yeah.
Especially like maybe not us 100%. Some people start getting spooked. But then if you look at neighboring countries, that could be a reality. They could be nuked, you know? Mm-hmm. And then if they get nuked, it's like, first of all, how do we detect it? How do we stop it and stuff like that? Obviously, there's some measures in play and maybe stuff that our government won't tell us. They keep on saying that they have like defenses, but how good are they? Yeah. We don't know, because they don't want anyone to know, because then it would kind of like ruin the whole thing of it being a defense. You tell the enemy like, this is how our stuff works, then what's the whole point of it all, right?
Right.
They could just figure out a way to go around it or destroy it or do something to disrupt it. And and with postmodern stuff, like I was looking at some of that stuff, and it's very dark. It puts you like in a dark mindset, and it kind of like snaps you into their mindset where it's like that utopia is never gonna happen. At least that's the way I interpret it, or the way I see it.
Yeah.
And I kind of gravitate towards that stuff. Like I kind of relate to it. At least with it, in the sense that I remember, you know, growing up, and this is like late 90s because I'm from 91, and I remember back in the day it was like things where people were talking like doomsday events and Y2K and stuff like that.
2000,
And I always I joke around with some of my friends. I tell them I'm a survivor, and they're like, survivor or what? I'm like, end of the world several times.
Yeah.
I'm like, I survived the Judgment Day of the Terminator. I think they said that in 1998 we were gonna get nuked or something. That's how it goes in the movie or something. I'm like, I survived that. I survived Y2K. I survived all those. They would always call them the crazy preachers that come out and say the world is gonna end on this date, and like it never happens. Imagine one day someone does come out and they're
just
right.
by sheer chance.
Yeah, just by sheer luck. It starts getting easy if you start calling every year.
If you do it every day, then guaranteed it's gonna happen.
Yeah. And so
when someone calls it, because something's eventually going to happen.
And every time that we survive a end of the world, I mark it down on my list. I'm like, I'm a survivor of that. Also,
survive. Nothing happened. They just made a really bad prediction.
Also, something. Just talking about that, I remember. I don't know if you noticed, but like on Facebook, they had this thing where you can mark yourself as safe if you let you.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So I noticed some people changing their area of where they live to where a disaster just happened, and then you can mark yourself safe, and it's just people started doing that to be silly, even though like even it's funny in the sense that they're like messing around.
Funny, yeah.
But at the same time, it's like it's something serious, so it's like this very dark humor kind of thing,
Mark yourself as safe. Yeah, I mean, you are safe.
You are, yeah.
But there's no reason to do that if you're not in the area.
Yeah.
So I take it, on the one hand, it sounds like you don't like postmodernism.
But I love it.
But on another end, you're attracted to it. But anyhow, my old university was an attempt at a utopia similar to the domes. And just like all of the rest of them, something fails. And the thing that that didn't sit well with me first of all, let me say what did sit well with me, is that they were really good at the practical things, but they were too good in my view. So they were really good at getting people to land internships, for instance. But one of the things that was too good was they had grade inflation. So part of the reason why people would land internships is because they knew if they just went into the office the day before, the grades came in, then they could just cry and go from a D to an A, and then they have that on their resume that they got an A in control systems or something. So then they get a job. And then once you have a job, well, you learn almost everything on the job for engineering. So you don't really, it's just a rat race to get the job. And then once you get the job, hopefully you've learned how to learn well enough so that you can keep it.
You think that's good or bad?
I think it's bad. I think that's what I'm saying. I think they were too good at the thing that they tried to do. They were so good that they were actually, in my view, cutting corners in order to get it. But it works because of that subtle thing, which is that when you're training in engineering, you're not really learning what you're going to be using most of the time.
I have a question to ask, very kind of personal, obviously,
No,
I know
go for it.
It's your ethnicity, and I'm just very curious. You going to a black? It was a university, or was it community college or university? University. Do you feel empowered? I'm assuming
no.
Okay, you didn't feel empowered.
No, but I feel like what I saw there was the first version of what I saw here, which is that, like I said, there's no utopias, but there's something that happens in every society when you push their limits just a little bit. And that's that they have to make a decision whether or not they're going to say, hey, we're open to this, we're going to go along with it, or they're going to say, you're a threat. And the same thing happened there. I started pushing things here and there, and eventually I got on the bad list, and they were like, this guy's a fucking threat. And we don't like him. And it was like, yo, but everything I'm doing, it's not bad. It's just different.
Can I ask how they thought you were a threat? Like, how do you get on, like, this naughty list? Like, obviously, you have to present.
The short answer is you just push the boundaries. But the thing that literally happened to me that let me know, like, oh, this is not cool here, was I was working with a professor doing undergraduate research. And the professor said, hey, I just got grant money, and I'd like you to found a club so that we can have an undergraduate research symposium or something at the end of the school year. So I said, cool. I went to the office. I got all the paperwork, filled it all out. This is the president, vice president, secretary. This is the professor. We have all our own funds. We're not asking for any money. And then I go in to turn in the paperwork. And I'm like, hey, this is my first time here. What do I do? And the lady behind the desk is like, oh, what are you here for? And I said, I'd like to found a club. And she said, oh, okay. I'm like, where do I turn in the stuff? And she says, oh, you don't just turn it in. You got to speak to Mr. Brown first. And I'm like, all right, where's he at?
Who's this Mr. Brown?
Let's make it quick. I guess he's like the gatekeeper. And I finally, 5-10 minutes in, he opens up the door. Oh, yeah, come in. And I hand him the paperwork. And the first thing he starts doing is reading everything that's in the paperwork out loud to me. And
what's
I'm like,
the point?
Yeah, and I'm like, I know, I already read it. It's fine. Everything's there. And he's like, okay, but you need to make sure you have a president and a secretary. And I'm like, yeah, we we have the names in the spots, the student ID numbers. We're ready to go. Just wanted to turn this in. And I'm realizing after a certain point, like, oh, he's like trying to slow me down for some reason. And I'm like, what, have I done something to this guy? Like, what's going on? And then at the end, he says, let me be honest with you. You're not going to found this club this quarter or this semester. For sure, not this semester. And this was something that the timing was a little bit important because we wanted to put on the thing at the end of the year. And
why would he tell you such a thing?
And he says, well, because I already have a stack of applications this high, and I don't think I'm going to make it to yours. And I was like, this is too weird for it to not be a direct, like, message.
But he's already there at that point.
I'm like, just approve it now. Who gives a fuck? But it was one of those things where I was like, there's something else going on that you're not telling me and you expect me to already know. And later on, I decided, I told my professor, it looks like it's not going to happen this quarter, this semester. And we ended up just ditching the whole thing. And the thing is, what I decided is I'm going to found a club, but I'm not going to do it through the school because there's too many there's too much bullshit. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have groups of students work on projects with me. Because I don't have to go through the school to just have people work on shit with me. So this is engineering stuff, but I bought a microcontroller. I started playing around with an Arduino. I started programming a little bit, got a little robot thing working, got some 3D printing shit working, showed people, hey, this is what we could be doing all the time. Who knows? Maybe we could be competing 5 years from now. And actually recruited some people. Like we were like 15 deep at one point, and I was running meetings. But the thing about it was, like, the department head found out somehow. And he started mocking me for it. Because I said, well, maybe we might be able to build something that flies like a quadcopter soon. And we made common mistakes. Like, we ordered parts that weren't compatible. And then we actually did need money. So then when we asked for the money, that's when they kind of stepped in. And they were like, well, you guys got to finish this before you move on to that. And we were going to control this and that. People started not showing up to meetings and the whole thing kind of just dwindled. And then the last thing was, it was just me and one other student who ended up going to Purdue University for grad school. And once he graduated, it was just me working on a lot of the stuff. So it was like, either I spend my own money and don't listen to anybody, or I ask this club from, and another thing was the club advisor that I got the money from, they fired her. So it was like all my connects to the money dwindled, all the students somehow left. Like, students were coming up to me and saying, hey, are we going to get credit for this? Are we going to get paid for this? I said, no, there's no school credit for this. You're not going to get paid. But like, the value of knowing how to put certain things together is very high right now. In the engineering world, if you know hardware and software together, for instance, and you're black, you're going to get a job. You're going to be more competitive for a job than the people who just went to classes because you actually know how to do practical skills. But
that's sad.
That wasn't the culture. And keep in mind, like, I'm from California. So when I think about engineering, a lot of what I'm thinking about is young people running companies. But in Alabama, a lot of what they think about is like the really big old school industries like oil, like power, where you're really just joining a team that would work perfectly well without you. So you're signing up for a job versus being an entrepreneur and starting something brand new, and that being like, you know, the financial base for your whole fucking family years from now. They're not really thinking of that. They're like, okay, secure job. So their concerns were very different. They weren't trying to build skills to build companies. They were trying to build skills to get hired by companies. And they didn't recognize that a lot of the stuff that I was doing is good for the black community. The more, if we had a Steve Jobs every 10 years in the black community, come on, think about what that would do for our grandchildren.
I think at least I can already imagine like what it would do, especially if you have what I see like the way that I see it. I don't know how to word myself, but if you have someone that's your same ethnicity,
every 50 years even would be
amazing. Be in this position of basically being a role model. It is not only does it motivate people, but also they have someone that they could potentially reach out to and figure out, how do I get there? How do I become? How do I have your job? Kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like those are like the appropriate questions to ask. And I wish the same thing with, at least, you know, with the Chicano community. It's like, yeah, there's a couple of leaders out there, at least, you know, that I know of. Maybe I haven't dug deep enough. Maybe I haven't educated myself well enough. But it seems like, at least the ones that I always hear about is like civil rights activists. I'm like, that's great. You know, they're making, they're fighting for a cause for like basically a better tomorrow. But at the same time, I want to see someone, an engineer, an artist. I want to see other people in other fields. Someone that at least I can be like, oh, wow, if they did it, I can kind of do it too. Obviously, now that I'm an adult, I'm older, I feel like I don't need that anymore, but I wish I had that as a kid. Now I'm saying, okay, I don't see it. What am I going to do? It's now it's on my ball court. I'm the one that's going to hopefully get there, at least, or try. Because it's like, there's none. Or at least none that I know of. And like, you could either blame it on me and say, hey, dude, you're not doing your research or you're not looking in the right places. Or maybe I'm correct. Like, there is none out there. And so it's sad.
Yeah, but what's inspiring too is that just because a particular group of people don't have the same vision doesn't mean that there's no one out there who has the same vision. So as long as you can connect with the other people who are like you, then it'll be fine. In fact, you could look at the meantime as kind of like a it's what you have to make it through in order to get to that time that's going to be more rewarding.
And then at least and I completely agree with you with what you just said. But now it's gotten to the point, this is what I forgot to mention, is that, okay, I told myself, okay, there's no one in the Chicano community out there that's getting there, or at least that I know of, right?
Right.
But if now I'm starting to wish anyone that's a minority, if they can get there, oh my God, like,
right,
I made it somehow, you know? I kind of want to call it like a we thing, even though it's an individual thing. I'm like, okay, if it's someone, you know, that's not in my culture, but at least has been someone that's been through this whole struggle of being put down or being called, you know, labeled as lesser or seen as lesser, then it's like, okay, we're making some steps forward. We're finally breaking the barrier, or whatever you want to call it, right? And mentioning what you were talking about earlier, like having like a big company and like just joining the workforce and kind of like helping them continue to make profits, right? At least that's how I see some of these big companies. Like, how can we make things more efficient? And then they start figuring out ways to like cut corners and maybe put machines to do certain things, instead of teaching individuals like, hey, invent something new, be creative. Yeah. Grab these old ideas or these old concepts or pre-existing things and make something new. And so I actually started messing around, at least this quarter with, this quarter that just passed, with a little bit of Arduino as well. Okay. I started using the Circuit Playground Express, from Adafruit. And I wanted to see, I took this design class, the interactive objects class. And I wanted, at least my thing was like, I've never taken a design class per se, especially here at Davis. And how can I take this class and can I even apply it to my art? You know? So I started messing around with this thing. I came in like knowing some basic programming, or at least a basic understanding, and kind of like what a microcontroller is.
Yeah.
And potentially all the sensors that you could connect to it. You know, a microphone, you know, sound sensor, or a light sensor, or even like detecting colors, you know, or just other sensors. And there's so many. I started like going crazy just looking at websites, and I'm like, wait, there's oxygen sensors, there's all these CO2 sensors. Like, I could potentially make something that can like detect all these things that I can't, you know, temperature sensors and stuff like that. I'm like, that's so cool. I'm just thinking of all this like kind of like cyberpunk stuff that I can make. Like, this is so exciting.
You can make a robotic you.
Yeah, I can make a robotic you. And it's exciting. And just you talking about like how you tried to make this club and just you're trying to make something that you haven't done before. And I experienced the same thing that you did. You start doing some research and you kind of have like this basic understanding of how to do something. So you go out there and start buying the parts. And it's just, I think it's part of the learning process. I ended up buying, just to talk a little bit about a project that I did. I had this partner, and in design class, we were making, it was like, we had to come up with, like, get a sci-fi idea. So what we were looking at was, in the movie Aliens, there was this thing called, atmospheric, like generator. And in the Aliens movie, it was like this big kind of like it almost seems like one of those like cooling towers like in nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
And it was the concept is that it creates an environment that humans can breathe in. Like, it releases oxygen, you know, the right mixture, you know, like nitrogen, oxygen.
Yeah.
I don't know too much about but you know what I'm talking about, right? Like the air that we breathe. And we were like, oh, I always thought that was a really neat thing. And so I always had my head like kind of like in La La Land thinking about the future, or like sci-fi concepts. Sci-fi has always been like this big thing that I just enjoy, you know? It feels like it's better than our current reality.
It is.
And
you can just design it however you want too.
Yeah. And so I was thinking, okay, let's say I had this planet and humans can't live in it, right? Let's say my wacky invention or whatever in my head, I can shape this planet however I want, kind of thing. I was thinking of, okay, instead of just having it in one location, I obviously in the Aliens movie, you don't know, they just show you one. You don't know if they're spread out throughout the whole planet or whatever. Right. I'm thinking things like, at least I feel like I'm thinking more logically. And I was like, what happened if we have these artificial plants like spread out throughout the whole planet? It would like help distribute oxygen and the right conditions throughout the whole planet. And so I was talking to my partner. I'm like, okay, how can we use the microcontroller and then like stuff? We're not going to make a real synthetic plant or anything close to it, but it's like presenting this concept. It's just like a thing. And so we had to test out different fans, and then we had programming. And what we started to do was we started to get plastic and then melt it to create like inflatable structures. And then we didn't come up with this idea. We saw that there was other artists working with inflatables, but we wanted to get this sci-fi concept and then this already pre-existing like making inflatable sculptures and kind of like fuse it together. Yeah. And making an artificial plant. Right. But it was not, obviously we're not producing real oxygen or anything. It's just a fan turning on and blowing it up. But the way we wanted to make it was we're using the light sensor on the microcontroller. So when light shines on it, or like, at least we're saying sunlight, you know? You can think of it as like a solar panel or whatever, right? Yeah. So it detects light, and then it kicks on the fan, and then it makes this inflatable fill up with air. And then when there's no light, it deflates. And then we also use the color sensor or whatever that's on the thing. So we had color recognition. We put like a little piece of like red tape, and it would turn these little LEDs that we soldered onto the circuit. Yeah. They would turn red. And then if we put green, they would all turn green. And then we thought it was cool, you know? We just added that to make it seem cooler, you know? It was just like a flashy thing.
Yeah.
And we saw that. I'm like, this is so cool. And then the concept was like, if this was a new sci-fi idea, or at least recycling this sci-fi idea, we could have... I started doing a little bit of research. Maybe I went a little too off topic, but I did find out that some researchers, I forgot their names, but I just briefly skimmed over this article, where they found out that they could shoot, carbon dioxide molecules with like some sort of laser, and then split it into carbon monoxide and oxygen. And so I was like, okay, we need oxygen to breathe, right?
Right.
But what can we use carbon monoxide? So I did a little quick Google search. I'm like, oh, they use this for like metal processing. Like, this is perfect for like what they call an off-world colony, you know? Like, imagine a human colony on another planet. They're gonna want to mine. They want to make metal structures. I'm like, if there happens to be a lot of carbon dioxide for some reason on this planet, we can have this structure that zaps carbon dioxide molecule, splits the oxygen, we need it, release that into the environment, and then you have the carbon monoxide, collect that, use it for metal processing, you know? And then you have like this plant-like structure that inflates, and this membrane that would allow oxygen to slowly leak into the environment. It would be perfect. And then just have all of these spread out through the whole planet. It would be super cool, you know?
Yeah.
And so we ran with it, and we presented it in class, and it was exciting. And what I kind of like, I want to pull it back to what you were saying. We ran into all those problems, like buying stuff that didn't work right or was not compatible. So it was like, and we were trying to research it, and it was just like, there was this one point where like, oh my God, this is not going to work. Yeah. We messed up. And then finally, I remember the day that we were like 2 days before the project was due. And we're like, we're not going to get a grade on this. Like, we messed up. Like, this is it. Like, we failed. And the part was barely getting 3D printed. It was getting done. And we were just, I just felt like that was it, you know? My last quarter here in Davis. And it's embarrassing, like, not completing a project. And all of a sudden, we're using alligator clips, and all of a sudden the fan turns on and everything works perfectly. Like, we did a test run, a dry run as we call it, like without the structure or anything, and it works. And we were just clapping and hollering, and it was like super exciting. Yeah, because we were literally at the point of just giving up, and then finally it kicks in, and it's like this emotion. It was the best feeling ever, you know? Yeah. Like, you accomplished the impossible. And then finally we get the 3D printed parts, and then we put it all together. Yeah. And then we make a quick video, and we put it up on YouTube, and then we make a quick PowerPoint, you know? And our PowerPoint was mostly focused on the process. Like, we showed all our failures. And I think that was the most interesting part. Like, we failed all these times. And we melted all these different plastics. And finally, we found out that trash bags were pretty good, like the white trash bags. They're very thin, and the white works great with diffusing some of the LEDs instead of just clear see-through plastic. And I'm like, who would have thought that a trash bag, you know, for our project, you know? No, I don't think maybe other people think about putting trash bags on their project, but I had never really thought about that. And then the fan that we used was like one of those big computer fans for like the big gaming PCs. And it worked great because it has the pins and everything that we needed. And it was just super exciting. And it was like one of the projects that I felt the most proud of. Even though it was like this, like, you know, this wonky thing, it was like, wow, you know, we did it kind of thing. And then I'm like, I wish I could feel this more, like in other projects. I wish I would have been messing around with microcomputers earlier, microcontrollers, right? And I want other people to experience this. I want, you know, feel like there's something there that potentially people could use in the future. Not only, in my sense, it was for art, but it can be used for other applications. I know that in agriculture, you know, for testing out the soil and stuff like that. I know that I think they have a nitrogen sensor or something like that. And then obviously, you know, the list is endless. I think something that could be applied to multiple fields of study.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Well, I would say what you experienced is the process of prototyping. And it's not dependent on microcontrollers specifically, but it's the idea that you can have a big project, you can break it down into pieces, you can understand what are the essential components and what are the extra components, and you could say, fundamentally, this big thing is just this small number of systems. You know, it needs to be this, this, and this. And then if we can get that, if we can get these systems to just work, we can prove this other big thing. So it's almost like the model of the car versus the actual car, or like the engine versus the actual car, where it's not the whole thing, it's a prototype, but it's enough. It's enough to show that this really can be solid if we went all the way with it. You know, and there's so many parts of that experience that, in my view, cannot be replicated. You have to actually go through the process. So I call this the Chefofx podcast. And chef is, I misuse or kind of rebrand the word chef, although plenty of other people have used this rebranding, to mean just like creating something in general. And Chefofx is just kind of like a math joke, but it's like a chef with respect to technical things.
Are you the chef?
Well, in my view, everyone's a chef, but everyone's also a fucking sheep, which is another story. But that's what the podcast looks like. But it's not sideways and upside down. It's right ways up.
That's supposed to be a sheep?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's like the mouth and the eyes kind of thing?
Sure.
Okay. Or I'm just making that up.
Well, definitely the eyes. The other thing, I'll consider it a nose, but it makes more sense as a mouth to most people.
I can see the nose.
It's like a cat nose.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Anyhow, what I would say is that experience of prototyping is the best example of cooking. Cooking, chefs have to cook. Cooking is just the process of taking steps toward accomplishing a goal. That's it. You have a goal. It takes certain steps to accomplish it. As long as you're moving forward, you're cooking. But you can't replicate cooking. You have to actually cook to know what it's like to cook. And whatever meal you're trying to cook is going to have different requirements. But all of them have the requirements that you find in prototyping. You got to come up with whatever whatever the goal is. That's one thing in and of itself. Formulating a goal. How do you choose what you're going to pursue? That, in my view, is one of the most interesting parts of any project. What are the questions you're trying to answer? How do you even decide that this thing is worth pursuing? Yeah, somebody can give you a job description. Do this. But it's another thing if you're coming up with the job description and then doing it. And that would be one of the big things that I saw. That's like, this is, unless you're actually cooking, you're always going to be like B or C level. Usually, there's a maximum potential that you have as just a worker, as just a follower. At some point, you have to say, hey, I'm going to decide what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to actually do that, or at least attempt to do that, and go with the failures, and go with the mistakes, and learn from them, rather than learning from some other person telling you yes, yes, no, no. Learn from the experience of trying to pursue that goal. And it's a completely different relationship to getting things done that I feel like it's a disservice if you're not encouraging this or supporting it. And I think people who treat the regular school as a substitute, they don't have an understanding of like, yo, this is a different thing that we're training here. And it's upsetting when you see people, especially black people, of all people, when you see people not acknowledging that like this is something special. Prototyping is special. It's not the same as doing something that somebody else tells you to do.
I completely agree with you. It's like, also, without prototyping, just kind of like talking about it, maybe people don't grasp.
They've never done it.
Yeah. And
you got to do it
so you
to
just
know
sound
what
like
it's like.
Yeah, you just sound like a quack.
Exactly.
I remember trying to explain to people what I was thinking, and I would just lose, and I could just tell by the looks in their eye, they're like, this guy's nuts or
You're
something.
just playing around with resistors. Who cares?
Yeah.
You made some lights blink. Who cares? Like, dude, you've never gone through this process. that I had to go through to make those lights blink, to make that trash bag blow up. You don't know everything that goes into that.
And then, like you were talking about, like prototyping, the reward that you get is kind of like this sense of, it's very empowering.
There's nothing like that. You can't, no matter how many times somebody says good job, that's not the same as actually doing a good job.
And then once you actually have that thing, you start, at least what I started to think was like, wow, if I made this little thing work, maybe I can start thinking about other stuff. Maybe I haven't thought about it yet, but if I start thinking about something else, maybe I can accomplish that also. I can make a prototype, make it work, and then from there, make it bigger, make it better, you know?
Well, you're proving to yourself that your intuitions are wrong most of the time, or a lot of the time, because you yourself didn't think you could do it, but then you did it. So now that thing, whatever you feel, oh, I can't do it. Whenever you feel that, you have an actual experience of persevering through something. So you know, hey, that feeling exists and it's real. But that says nothing about the reality of my potential. I can't go off of that feeling anymore. I can't allow it because now I already know I've been through that before. And then you see other people who are giving up, and you realize like, wow, if they would have gone through it, they might not give up anymore. Imagine if you could scale that. Yeah.
And then it's like this moment of realization. And I know exactly what you're talking about because I don't know if I told you before, but I wanted to make a little mini pottery wheel.
Yeah.
And so
you told me. Yeah.
And so I didn't know. I'm like, okay, I'm not mechanical engineer. I'm not electrical engineer. I'm like, at least I want to assume that I'm an artist. You know, I'm going for the art degree. I'm making stuff. I hope I'm an artist, right? Sometimes I don't feel like an artist because I don't feel like my work is not.
But you cook.
Yeah, so but I'm cooking. Yeah, that's true. I'm always experimenting.
You got meals. You actually have done things that are artistic, and so you continue to do things.
And so I wanted to make this mini pottery wheel, and the whole reason behind it is like I want to make mini pottery, and in order to make it, it's like I feel like it would be easier to have something at at kind of like that I could put on top of a table, so I can be sitting upright like I am right now, and just work at a very comfortable position. Instead of being hunched over on a regular wheel. I know that I could potentially raise it with bricks or whatever, but that's too much work when you can have a little thing that you can just put on the table. You know? Why am I going to go get bricks and start doing all this stuff when maybe I can be at this, we're at a prestigious university. People say that, we're a research institution. I'm like, if research is going on, then maybe there's people that can help me out. So I went around trying to get help. And it just felt, eventually I started feeling real bad because I couldn't find someone that could help me, or at least I was motivated as I was, because maybe they didn't see the value in making a mini pottery wheel. Maybe to them it's just junk or whatever, but for me it's like I need it for my art. I want to make little pottery. I just want to try it out and make something interesting that people are going to be like, wow, you made this bigger thing into a little thing. That's really cool, right? And so I went out and I started doing my own research. I'm like, how can I like make this quicker, kind of like cut corners, but still make like basically an efficient little machine. And so what I did is I remember like calling up my mom. I'm like, hey mom, you go to the saw meet a lot. Would you be able to find me like a sewing machine or something? She's like, why do you want it? I'm like, oh, it's just a project, And the reason why I was specifically asking for a sewing machine is that I know that they have a foot pedal. You can control the speed of the needle. Oh. I'm like, oh, that's perfect because in a pottery wheel you have normally you have a foot pedal. Some of them have knobs, that you can turn, but I would rather have a foot pedal so I can free up my hands, so I don't have to be worrying about a little knob. I can be using my hands, both of my hands. And so I'm like, I then took apart a sewing machine. I had the motor, and I had the foot pedal. It's all attached, And then I went to a thrift store here in Davis. I forgot what it's called.
HPCA or something like that.
Something, And then they had this wine box, this wooden wine box. I'm like, why am I going to make a box when I can just buy this $2 wooden box, and just cut it out? And then I started doing some research. I'm like, okay, so we have I saw how the sewing machine was. It was one of those older Singers. So I took out the motor and I saw that it had a V groove belt and it had a pulley. I'm like, if if I can if I'm like, okay, it's at a certain position like this.
Mm-hmm.
If I can go that vertical, set up vertically, if I can turn it horizontal, it would be great. But I don't want to be cutting up the sewing machine. That's going to be too much work. So I just disconnected the motor, and then I went and bought a V-groove pulley, and then I had some bearings, and I just put a shoulder bolt to it, and I attached it, with an Allen wrench.
Yeah.
And I just put it on a box, and then I went and asked a good friend of mine. His name is David, a fellow peer, one of my classmates. He's super technical. He just graduated with me and with an entomology minor, so he's always like setting up bugs. So he has like this attention to detail, and then he's always he was working at the craft center. He was a volunteer, and he had access to the wood shop, and I really needed access to a bandsaw, and he helped me out. Yeah. So he helped me like make all the cuts and stuff like that, very precise. And just working with him, finally I found the person that I wanted to collab with. It just happened, It's like this whole time I was like looking around for mechanical engineer students and electrical engineer, and it's just like,
yeah, they're not going to help you.
They're not going to help me. But then I met someone else that my same field, but he's always curious about like making machines and stuff like that, and we kind of like clicked. Like he saw what I was going for, and I knew that he was understanding, the random gibberish that I was just spewing out. He understood my crazy talk. And then we put this thing together, and then the moment we started up, it was so cool. I remember we were taking a ceramics class at the same time. It was a sculpture ceramics class. Yeah. And I brought it into the classroom, and I just put a little piece of clay on it, and I made this little little cup. And then he went out and rolled out a little handle. And so I made a little coffee mug, a little miniature coffee mug. And we were exactly like how you're laughing right now. We were just cracking up, and we thought it was the silliest thing ever, but it was so cool. It worked, Yeah. This thing worked. And the whole feeling of like, it was honestly, it was the best feeling ever. It was better than this last project that I made. This more recent one. That one was like the start of it all. It kind of like, that got me motivated to eventually end up in that class, to start messing out with a microcontroller. I always get, I always mix and match. I don't even know if it's the right term, microcomputer. It is. It's a microcomputer.
It's controller. Well, yeah, I think a microcomputer is a part of it, possibly. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I'm usually pretty terrible with names of things that I haven't taken one of those courses in years.
And so it goes back to what you were saying. It's like... That whole time I was doubting myself. I was out there asking people for help, and I felt terrible. I remember calling up my parents and being like, I just kind of like, honestly, I wanted to cry, dude. I know I'm a full-grown adult, but it's like, it sucks when things are just not going how you want to.
Yeah.
And your eyes start getting a little watery, Like, fuck,
You can use one of those mini cups to catch your tears.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Well, you can't roll it.
And
you
then
can't
sip
spin
it.
But you have to be hunched over to make it.
Yeah.
You don't have your own roller, your own spinner. What are they called?
Mini wheel? Like
wheel?
Mini
No, just call it a pottery wheel.
Yeah, pottery wheel.
You don't have a mini pottery wheel to make it, which is the cause of the tears, ironically.
Yeah. And making it was so cool. And then I kind of... Now, I just had my parents just picked it up, and now it's like being taken to San Diego as we speak. Yeah. And once it's down there, I hope to like make more of the stuff. Also, what's cool about mini pottery, this is what I'm geeking out about, is the amount of real estate that it takes up within a kiln. When a kiln is where you fire ceramics, because they're so tiny, they take up so much surface area on the thing. You can literally put hundreds, and you can make stacks.
Yeah.
You can stack shelves within a kiln, and you can fire like hundreds of these things. And potentially, obviously, if you're looking at volume per profit, you could potentially, as a starting artist, You
make earrings.
Earrings that could be a potential.
People go wild over earrings.
That would be pretty cool. And make them a little bit light. Maybe use like a lighter clay body potentially. Yeah, that would be cool, like little jugs,
Yeah, man. I've seen so many crazy earrings since I got to Davis.
My sister actually, she makes miniature food out of polymer clay. So I actually bounced an idea. Now that you mentioned earrings, I told her to stick to ethnic foods, like Mexican food. And I told her that I could make the little plates, and she could super glue the miniature food, and we could potentially make an earring, put a hook or whatever. Yeah. And then it would be super cool. Then it adds this like cultural flair, Yeah. That maybe people would be interested in. Oh, maybe they connect more to it. Yeah. It's just something silly and cool, Yeah. And it really serves no purpose, but it's just like kind of cool to have.
Yeah, but the best things don't serve a purpose. There's one of the things that happened to me, actually, same time I was at Tuskegee, is I got really into mathematics. Like, I was into speech and debate when I was younger. I liked sports. I liked a lot of normal shit. But then when I was in high school, like my final year, I took calculus, and I really liked it. And one of the general feelings was like every other rational discipline was just so sloppy compared to mathematical thinking that it just seemed like the only thing worth pursuing if I'm going to pursue any of them, including philosophy, which I really like. But it just seemed like everything's so fucking sloppy. Like, this is the only one where 100% I'm on board.
Does it feel cleaner? Like,
oh, yeah. It's like cutting with a sharp knife when you've had a dull knife your whole life. So, but it takes some effort to get into it. But once you get into it, then it's like cutting with a sharp knife. So when I got into college in Tuskegee, that was like my main thing was math, and I don't know, somehow connected. What were we talking about before? Maybe I've been smoking too much of this fucking
we were talking about prototypes, and then now we led on to math. Because you're talking about your experiences back at university.
something math, forgot the general point. Can I tell you how I started the podcast?
Yes.
Okay, so when I first thought of it, I was in Alabama. Yeah. But I didn't do it. I'd made a couple of prototypes with my friend. We were trying to do a video setup, and then that ended because I went into like a deep psychosis. I was like in my senior year. Everything was fine.
Well, could you describe that? Like, what is it? Like, what do you mean, like a deep psychosis?
Yeah, it's like Alice in Wonderland.
Was it like a bad state of mind, or more?
Well, it can get pretty bad in Wonderland. So the central thing that makes it bad, in general, it's just different. But the central thing that made it bad for me was delusions. And delusions are beliefs. So you just suddenly start believing things which may or may not be true. But it's just, you don't have the normal mental capacity to debunk things.
So you're not aware of them, right? Or
you're not aware that they're delusions, or even if you are, it's very difficult to get out of them. So if I believe you're a bird, there's nothing you can do to prove to me that you're not a bird. Until that delusion goes away, you're just a bird. Or even worse, I'm a bird. Oh, right? So I'm Jesus. There's plenty of religious delusions we can go into. But like the biggest one is conspiracy theories, or believing.
I love conspiracy theories.
Well, it can be pretty bad if you're delusional and you believe that people are out to get you or things like that.
Oh, yeah, it can be.
Because, well, here's the classic example. What if you think someone's going to kill you and you kill them in self-defense? Well, now you're a murderer. Yeah. So that's how delusions can really fuck up your day. Because
I think that would be like worst case scenario. Kind of.
That's normal case scenario.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. It's pretty. If you're delusional, you probably think somebody's trying to kill you.
It's funny how in the beginning when I sat down, I was like, what is this stuff? Yeah, MK Ultra. So I was talking about like a conspiracy theory, and then that was proven real, right?
And well, if something's real, then that's different. But if it's just a belief that it's really hard to shake. Anyhow, I ended up doing a carjacking. I got locked up for a year. And then when I got out, I finally started a podcast. But it was different in nature because now, instead of me being at this black college talking about, STEM, now I'm like fresh out of jail. So, and I'm like living at a halfway house, not in school.
Is it okay if I ask about the carjacking?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always been curious because you mentioned it. Obviously, maybe because we're in the setting, I feel like more open to ask about it.
Well, that's part of the benefit of this podcast.
It's like, was it during one of these delusions, or was it just something that, like, I would want to, like, get, like, basically put myself in your perspective. Like, why would you do such a thing?
Yeah, what is it? Yeah, so yeah, delusional thinking is at the center of it. So I think at the time, depending on which arrest we're talking about, one of them was a video game delusion, and the other one was...
Like Grand Theft Auto kind of thing?
Yes, but Grand Theft... Actually, both of them arguably were video game delusions. One of them is that there is an external controller. So someone is controlling me. The other one is I'm in control, but I'm in the Hunger Games. So I have to do extreme things just to protect myself. So both of them are false. There's no one controlling my behavior, and I wasn't in the Hunger Games. But these are the delusions that I had that motivated me to do the things that I did.
At the time, did it feel, like, cool? Like,
no, it was horrifying. Okay. So the one, both of them were horrifying. One of them's horrifying because you don't think you have control of your actions, which is scary. The other one is horrifying because you think you're in the Hunger Games, which means if you don't do this extreme shit, then something extreme is going to happen to you.
The only way I could relate to that, obviously, at least I don't think I've had a delusion before in my life, and I would not like to have one, or be in one. Yeah. But the way I can relate to you is that I have had plenty of nightmares, and in them, I can see how I've been put in, at least in the nightmares, I've been put in these situations where it's kind of Hunger Games, like your limited resources, people are out to kind of get you, and you have to, like, be quick on your feet to think, or you're, like, being hunted down, and there's, like, this rush to it at the same time. But it is terrifying. Like, you wouldn't want to experience it again. But at the same time, it's like, there's, like, this weird silver lining where it's like, for me, it's a little exciting. It's like, you're running around and stuff like that.
Well, I would say it was mostly exciting. Just those events weren't exciting. So the way that I frame the psychosis is that there are times where you're just normal. And there are times where you're normal, but something weird happens during the day. But you know that it's weird. And then there's a 50-50 where it's like weird stuff is happening half the time, normal stuff is happening half the time. And usually at that point, you don't really even recognize the weird stuff as weird. And then it's the time where it's almost all abnormal, and there's maybe one normal part of your day or normal part of your week. Then there's a time where there's no normal period. Like, you might have a normal 5 minutes out of every week. And I was in the normal 5 minutes of every week by the time I started doing criminal stuff. But that whole other time was like months, right? And that whole other time, there were a lot of fun things that happened during that time. So,
what would you consider, like, during your, is it appropriate to call it like an episode or something? Like, the whole event?
That's probably the best way. Very appropriate.
What was the height of, like, the weirdness? What was the weirdest thing that you experienced? Like, you thought, like, holy shit, this is like way too weird. This is, like, kind of getting out of hand.
Well, the problem with it is when you recognize that it's getting out of hand, that's the 5 minutes of normalness. So
it's like a window.
Yeah, like you might have some moments where you have a regular reaction to the world. Like, an obvious one is, hey, I'm in a weird place. Like, you can be in a situation where I was, for instance, where I was traveling a lot. All of it was normal. But then, like, maybe once or twice during the whole thing, I'd be like, hey, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be here. I should, like, be in class right now, which is a normal reaction to just, like, being on a plane headed to who knows where. Whereas when you're fully in the delusion, you should be on that fucking plane. This is exactly where you're supposed to be because of all these other delusional things that led up to it. So, I would say that the biggest thing it's hard to wrap your head around is, I give the broken leg example. Let's say you're a track runner. You have a certain lap time, and then you break your leg. Well, to say, like, let's make sense of a lot of the psychotic stuff without going into all of it. is kind of like saying, let's measure your time. Like, still run the lap, but with the broken leg. Versus just saying, wait, let's just not measure the times until they're healed. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like that. You're like, well, it's kind of like, what is it like when your brain is broken? And I can tell you, but everything I tell you is going to be from the delusional perspective. Mm-hmm. There's no way I can tell you what that's like from a normal perspective. Mm-hmm. Except, actually, there's one funny thing, which is that I was in a linguistics class, and we were learning about parts of the brain, and I think it was called like Werner's syndrome or something like that. But basically, when it comes to speech, there's a part of your brain that, like, I think it understands. No, there's a part of your brain that processes that allows you to speak. There's a part of your brain that allows you to speak, and then there's another part of your brain that's more comprehension based. Okay, even if that's all wrong, let me tell you my experience. I'm talking to this guy on a train, and he's looking at me dead in the face, and I'm like, hey, I need to use your, do you have a phone I can use? I need to make phone calls. You know, it's very important that I make a phone call. My phone is dead. And he's looking at me. He says, you're not making any sense. What are you saying? And I'm like, I need to use a phone. The phone, I don't have any phone right now, and it's important that I make phone calls. And he's like, dude, you're not speaking. I don't know what you're saying. Right. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, flash forward, I'm in this linguistics class. And they're like, yeah, there's a certain thing where you can speak confidently, but everything that you say, it's like a word salad. So you could say like, yeah, and the butter and the cat dog and the gibberish, blah, 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 blah. And there'll be people speaking like this. And then the person listening is like, that's not a meaningful sentence. Mm-hmm. I think I've had that experience because the guy saying, you know, I don't know what you're saying, and me seeing from the outside, hey, maybe that's what it was like for him. Maybe for him, I was speaking gibberish to him, but in my mind, everything was making sense.
Now that's making
But you can't actually have the outside of your brain experience, so all you can do is kind of guess. Like, I can tell you what it was like for me. I don't really know for anybody else, like, what it might have been like.
That makes me wonder about, like, there's this one experience that I had as a kid. Like, I lived in this little house that was, like, at the corner of a block.
Yeah.
And I remember this one day I was looking out the window because I just heard some lady talking. She was walking up and down the block with a high heel up to her head. And she was just talking, like, kind of like if she was on the phone. Mm-hmm. This is in the, late 90s, right? So, like, cell phones were, like, kind of, like, coming out kind of thing. So, at least becoming more accessible, you know. You started to see it more in poor neighborhoods. And I was just looking at this lady. We still had corded phones, you know, landlines in the house. I was looking at this lady with a high heel up to her head. And at the time, I didn't know cell phones existed. You know, I was a little kid, and we still had a landline. So I asked my mom, hey, what is that lady doing out there? My mom was like, oh, you know, don't stare, don't laugh. It's like, she's probably like high on some drug or something.
Yeah.
And she's just in her own world, and this is very sad, you know, you shouldn't. My mom was telling me, don't make fun of these people, you know?
Yeah.
They're going through their own issues. I thought it was hilarious, even though after she told me.
It is hilarious.
Because there's something comical, you know, about it. But at the same time, you know, now that I'm older, I see this how my mom was viewing it. It's sad, you know? You get into an addiction and you just can't stop it. And her, at least from that early age when I was looking at her, my mom tried to explain to me. I'm like, so her brain is fried, kind of thing. Like, she, you know, whatever she used, she's not comprehending the world or the reality that she's in, you know?
Well, the cause and effect with addiction and mental illness is not always obvious. So the go-to idea is that people are psychologically normal, then they use drugs, and then
it heightens it or makes it worse, kind of thing.
Well, that's what pushes them over the edge. But the reality is, there's kind of a lot of things are playing out at the same time. So one of the simplest things is like if your parents are tall, then you know it's more likely that you will be tall. But there are things that you can do in your life to be taller or be shorter than whatever your genetic potential says or dictates, right? It's like you have some kind of a baseline. So some subtle things that can happen is you could be predisposed to have a mental illness, and that predisposition might also make it more likely that you try drugs, and then trying the drug could then make it more likely that you develop the actual mental illness. So then it's kind of like, well, it's a chicken and egg thing. And then something else could happen. You could be 100% psychologically normal. You do enough methamphetamine, it will do certain damages to your brain, in which case, or, you do enough LSD, it'll certainly do this and that to your brain, so that now you have a similar output as someone who was predisposed for mental illness but never did a drug. Schizophrenia. It's very tragic. Yeah, but either way, there's a lot of different routes to get to a lot of different areas that people would consider mental illness, and it's not always clear. One, that drugs have any role to play in it, or two, the extent to which the drugs actually led to the this or the that. So,
yeah, and then I grew up in this poor neighborhood in San Diego, and that lady was not the first time that would not be the first time that I would see that. Eventually, I saw other stuff, and it's terrifying. Obviously, as a kid, you're defenseless.
Yeah.
And you're seeing these full-grown adults like outside your house.
Yeah.
Going through an episode or whatever they're going through. I remember once there was this guy that was just scratching away at himself. Mom was like, "Oh, that guy probably thinks he has bugs underneath his skin or something." Like
possibly, but there's a lot that could happen. There's a lot that could lead to that.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's some spooky stuff,
Well, what's spooky is that your brain is a machine. That your entire experience is actually being computed on some level. That's the real spooky thing, because that's whether or not you have a mental illness, right? The fact that you can see colors is a direct result between your brain and the eyes, no different from the Arduino sensor and the computational tool. So all that the mental illness is doing, or the drugs are doing, is playing with the way that your brain and the rest of your body and the processing and all that is functioning. But the fact that it is functioning, right? The fact that it is on some level a system is, I think, far creepier than any of the specifics of the mental illness.
Talking about kind of like the brain and processing and then delusions and stuff like that. One of the biggest things that I've been attracted to is dreams. Yeah. The how the mind creates these things, In a way, they're kind of delusions, at least how I see it. But obviously, it's labeled as a dream. You're resting, and then your brain is still active, creating these things. And I have, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I have constant nightmares. But it's gotten to the point where I got so used to that. I kind of, in a weird way, enjoy them, and and then I started to have or at least I believe that I have some sort of control over them. Not a complete. I have like stuff, and I could tell you some interesting ones. And there's one that's the most recent one. That's like the scariest one. Yeah, and it's scary in the way that some of the characters that pop up in it have been like terrifying. Do you want to hear one of them? Yeah. Okay. So here's one. This is the one that keeps on playing over in my head over and over again. And the weirdest thing is that I started to kind of see stuff in real life. This is the scary part, where it like trickles or has some sort of effect. And so I had this dream where I'm in the dream. There's parts where I see myself in third person. Yeah. And it happens random. And then also before I start to get into the dream, there's 3 types of communication in the dream. There's the vocal, the physical, kind of like how we're having right now. There's telepathic, so kind of like a voice in your head or in the environment. I consider that kind of telepathic. Yeah. And then there's the instantaneous, where I can, or someone can, instantaneously send information. It almost feels like at one moment you don't know something, and all of a sudden you instantaneously recall it, kind of like if it was a memory that you already had, but you never had it previously.
That is very right on the money with my delusional experiences. And so you realize that you already believe something.
Yeah. And so, and in the beginning of the dream, I see myself as kind of like an older version of myself, slightly older. I would say maybe 10 or 20 years kind of like into the future kind of thing. And I'm entering this house. And the house, I want to describe it. It's a wooden floor, and it has kind of like brick. It's a brick house, kind of like older style with a front porch, like a nice wide front porch.
Yeah.
Chimney and stuff like that. But when I enter the house, it's vacant. And I can see that there's those shapes that furniture make, like when there's dust, and then you remove the piece of furniture and there's like a blank, like a dustless area, and then there's dust around it. Or like it's been sun bleached kind of like around it, especially if it's near a window. And so I'm entering this house and I'm looking around it, and I don't know if I'm about to rent it or if I just bought it or if I'm inspecting. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
But I see myself coming into this house and I see these shapes, and I'm just walking around kind of like checking out the place. And I know that I didn't just break and enter. I had a key. I opened it. So it's somehow I'm like, it's okay for me to be in there,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like looking around, and it almost feels like I had never been in there before. I had never seen this place. And then in the dream, there's these two types of like visions or understandings that I have. There's the one where I look at an object and I instantaneously, like, I can see it. It's normal, like kind of like this glass bowl that you have.
Mm-hmm.
If in the dream, if I were to see that, I see it as a glass bowl. Then there's another type of vision that when I look at something, it's not only vision, but understanding. I already know that I'm looking at a glass bowl, but I can't make its structure physically. So I have to kind of like point that out first before I start getting deeper into the dream. And so as I'm inspecting this house, I come across a wall, and I know it's a wall, but I'm looking at it. There's something funky about it that I just can't put my finger on it. There's something off about it, and my brain cannot process why there's something off. So I decided the first thing to do is like, okay, so I have this object, this wall, that I can't process for some reason, and it's bothering me. So I reach out to touch it, and my hand sinks in, and instantaneously I know like a wall is not supposed to behave like that.
Yeah,
this is not a regular wall that I'm facing. So in my dream, I decide. I'm thinking this is kind of like at this time I didn't know that I already had control over the dream, but I can think in my dream. And in my dream, I started thinking, okay, so my hand went through the wall. Can I go through the wall? So I walk through it. And all of a sudden, I enter this room. And I believe it's a room, but at the same time, I feel like I'm out in the open. And it was completely dark. And then there's like this low light. And it shows this like polished cement floor. But it's like a rectangle. But then the rest of the room is like complete darkness.
Wow,
just absence of light. There's nothing. I don't know how far the room is or how it ends. And so I start walking, and all of a sudden, it almost feels like lights are turning on, but there's no light source. It's kind of like illuminating, and it feels like I'm looking out into the universe. And I kind of see faintly, kind of like stars, kind of thing. And then I hear a voice that comes from far away, but it's very strong. And instantaneously, I know that what is speaking to me is this thing that goes by Star Beast, or like it is a Star Beast.
Yeah.
And I started getting frightened. It's like this overwhelming feeling.
Oh, shit.
That whatever is talking to me it has some sort of power, and I'm instantly afraid. And it's the Star Beast. And it starts telling me, look through the glass, look through the looking glass. And these big, like kind of like magnifying glass, like lift up out of nowhere, and they have this metal structure around it, and it's telling me to look through the glass, and a lot of them lift up, I don't know how many feet apart from each other, and they all line up perfectly, and it spreads into like infinity.
Yeah.
And it's telling me to look through the glass, and I'm scared to look through the glass because I don't know whatever's talking to me. I don't know if it's like some sort of demon or some sort of whatever creature it is. I feel like if I were to look into the glass, I'm screwed or something. It's gonna do something weird to me.
Holy shit!
And so, I remember I had this brown jacket. Well, I don't know if it was like a coat, but I just remember looking, and I had like a kind of like a jacket, a brown jacket, and I reach into my pocket, and I'm terrified at this moment. I'm like, I know that in my mind I'm not gonna look through this glass.
Mm-hmm.
And then I start thinking to myself, I have a green laser pointer in my pocket, and what I pull out was a green laser pointer. Automatically, I felt like I was in control. Then I realized that it is a dream. and I start feeling even more scared because everything feels way too real. I can feel like my hairs and everything. It's just like too vivid. And so, and I get this idea. I'm instead of looking through the glass, to look into its gaze or whatever, I'm gonna shine this green laser pointer and like shoot it in the eye, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I from a distance, I put the green laser pointer, turn it on, and it was super intense. And I shoot this beam, and I just like move it around like this. Mm-hmm. Finally, I line it up, and it goes through all the glasses, and I hear this thing roar, like this thing just like a cry in pain. Mm-hmm. And before my vision, it just starts to vibrate as this thing like collapses time and space and then it tears through time and space to teleport in front of me. Wow. Like it was like way across the universe or something. This thing just like kind of like tore and then it appears before me.
What did it look like?
This is the thing. As it was tearing through, I couldn't make sense because my vision was just like it was vibrating and it just felt like it felt loud but without producing sound. It was like the weirdest thing ever. And I know that the Star Beast is coming at me, at full speed. It's faster than light speed because it's just tearing through time and space, Yeah. It's not even traveling really. It's just punching right through. And it tells me as it's coming at me, it tells me these things. It tells me that in the age of humanity, no one has been able to hurt it before. That I'm the first one. And it appears to me like this beautiful woman, kind of like 50 styles, kind of almost like pinup, but not really. 100%, very classy, She appears to me.
Latinx.
Yeah, Latinx. And
better be right.
And all of a sudden, like I don't even blink or anything, and I'm sitting down in a wooden chair. There's a table, and she's in front of me. I didn't even blink. It just instantaneously happened. Yeah. And I'm like, whoa, when was this? And now we're in a room with like kind of like a nice carpet, bookshelves, kind of cozy, And then she tells me that she wants to get to know me better. And the way we're gonna go about it is through a meal. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I see a staircase behind her, like this wooden staircase, and this man ascends down and comes towards me. And and I know that he's holding a platter full of food. And when I look up to see his face, I know that he has 2 eyes and a nose and a mouth. My brain is telling me, okay, he has these human features, but I cannot recognize his face. He does not really have a face. He's not faceless. He has a nose, eyes, and everything, but I can't process it. Yeah. And I start feeling freaked out. And then it puts a plate of food in front of me. And in a sense, I can smell the food. It has a smell, but it doesn't have a smell that's recognizable. And I know that there's food there, but I don't know what type of food. And she tells me, what do you want to eat? And in my mind, I was like, wait, but the food's already in front of us. How am I going to ask you what you're asking me what we're going to eat and then it's going to appear or something, And so me being silly, I'm like, okay, I want some chicken wings.
Right, and nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, nothing wrong. And all of a sudden, when I look back down at the platter, there's 5 chicken wings. Each one is a different flavor. And I could tell because it was a different coloration. I'm like, okay, maybe one of them is spicy. Maybe one of them is barbecue or something, right?
You like spicy food, by the way?
Yeah, I like spicy food. And so I like chicken wings and I like different flavors. And so it's like, later on when I woke up, I'm like, okay, that's very me, That's like something I would eat, I like having different little choices. And the way she was going to get to know me was I had to pick up each chicken wing. I know this is going to sound really funny. And I had to feed her. Oh. She would eat it and then she would get to know me. And as she got to know me, she's looking at me. And then she says that I can have anything that I want. I can make any wish. And at the time, I'm very terrified because I'm like, I heard stories of like demons asking people what you want. And there's always like a catch to it, Mm-hmm. Like you ask for something, people might want to go for like money or something physical. There's always some like messed up catch to it, Yeah. Like something really fucked up about it. So I'm terrified, and I know that I'm not gonna be greedy at all. I'm not gonna ask for any riches or power or anything. But maybe I can ask it for something that's gonna hurt it, something that can give me the upper hand or something, Yeah. I'm already screwed. I'm already sitting in front of this. This thing is not happy at me. I know that. she's not showing any facial expressions, I'm already scared. I'm already like, I know that I'm weaker. So I tell her, or the Star Beast, whatever. And I know that it's not really her at the same time. It doesn't really matter if it's a she. She just appeared like, the Star Beast appeared as a woman in front of me. So I asked the Star Beast, I'm like, I want your eye. And she looks at me. And she went from not having a facial expression the whole time to displaying anger. And I knew I had the upper hand for a moment, you know? She told me I can have anything, so I want your eye. And so she looks at me, and then she reaches. I knew that she opened up her hand. She didn't have anything. She closes it and goes like this and opens it up. And then there's this white glass eye. And I reach to touch it. The moment when I touch it, I instantaneously know that that single glass eye is called the Medusa's gaze. And so the moment I touched it, I start seeing visions of this battlefield. And the ground is charred and everything. And then there's these soldiers that are like advancing. And I can't tell really the era, just like guys with rifles. I can't really make out the time frame or anything.
Postmodern times, probably.
Yeah, maybe postmodern times, right? And it's like this whole battlefield has been wasted. And I know it's a combat zone because there's dead soldiers and there's rifles. If I hear gunshots and stuff going on. And they're like advancing and they're trying to sneak. And then there's this man that's just standing there with like kind of like a black trench coat kind of thing. Almost like funny thing, almost like Matrix, like, right? There's this guy with black gloves, bald, and I'm seeing this from like this third perspective, right? And as he starts turning, I see that it's me with a white glass eye, and then he looks at the soldier, and he just like, as this is unfolding, the Star Beast tells me that with the Medusa's gaze, I'm able to unsee the unseen. And I'm also able to vanquish armies, like destroy entire armies. And as I'm looking at the soldiers, I just like tear them apart. Some guy gets boils and just starts screaming. Some guy just gets torn up into pieces. So I instantaneously I see that he was able to see these soldiers that were sneaking up on him, and he was able to just wipe them out. And I freak out, and I just snatch that eye from her hand. And when I look at her face, she has an empty eye socket and is just like bleeding out. And it was like horrifying. And I just put it into my coat. And all of a sudden I'm upright again. And I'm back to like, you know, the cement slab, you know. And the room starts to vibrate as she starts to collapse time and space to get out of there. And she tells me that she has no reason to be in my reality anymore. That, you know, she's leaving. And right at that moment where she tears and jumps, that jump, I get to see its like true form. And it was this beast like with all like 1,000 arms. And then there was like one eye just kind of staring at me. And I knew that I had other eyes. And at that very moment, I knew that its other eyes were looking at other realities. And I was just freaked out. And then boom, it was gone. And so I got to see its true form for a split second. Maybe it was because of the eye or something. I don't know. And I'm like, okay, I'm freaked out a little bit. I'm shaking. I'm like, okay, I survived. I'm going to get out of this room now. So I start walking out the same place that I came from. And I go through the wall. Now I'm back into the house with the dust and everything. And I'm like, okay, did that just happen? And I reach into my coat. This is the scariest part. Reach into my coat. When I pull out, it's the white glass eye. And then I woke up from that dream. And so I'm like, okay, that was a very vivid, freaky dream, right? And then afterwards, I started having other dreams where she appeared. And sometimes it's a bloody eye socket, or sometimes she has the eye back in. And and there's always something going on where I'm like, I'm stressed out or I'm in danger or something. But in a way, even though it was like a pretty frightening experience, I felt a little bit safer now that I had this object, you know? It's like, oh, I forgot to mention one thing. I forgot to mention this part about the dream. When it first started speaking to me and I instantaneously knew that it was a Star Beast, it told me that, I know that, if you ever seen Hellraiser, there's this line that Pinhead says. No. He says that, I might be butchering it, but he says that To some, he's a demon, and to others, an angel. The Star Beast kind of said the same thing. Like, to some, I'm a demon. To some, I'm an angel. And I was like, this is pretty freaky, you know? Whatever's talking to me, I don't know what the hell it is. And when I woke up, obviously, you know, you wake up, cold sweat, it's a nightmare, whatever, you know? It's not real. I go about my day. But it stuck in the back of my head, and as I had more nightmares with this creature popping up, same woman and stuff like that, I'm like, okay, this is like, I don't know if I'm being haunted by this thing or what it is. But at the same time, I was like enjoying it. So it's like this sense of fear and enjoyment, kind of like intermingle or intermix. And kind of to pull it back to our original conversation about like delusions and stuff like that, started to wonder, like, what is my brain doing, you know?
Yeah.
Like.
But it should be doing that when you're asleep.
Yeah.
It's different when it's doing that when you're awake.
I know. I think it's much scarier if it's doing that while you're awake. Like, to handle that, to go through that.
It could be. It could be just fine.
Yeah. And I kind of want, like, in a weird way, I kind of want that.
Do some LSD. Do some shrooms, actually. Fuck LSD. Do some shrooms. Just smoke a lot of weed one day. Do an edible. Okay. You'll get there. And then you'll come back. That's the difference.
Talk to the Star
Do
Beast.
you ever come back? I mean, yeah, it can get pretty bad, but also it's not always that bad. And sometimes some people would say that it just depends on your environment, and it depends on how you react to whatever you see, and how do you react to your own fear? You know, if you are scared, if you think something's going to happen, sometimes being scared is the right solution. Other times calming down is the right solution. Other times this, other times that, and it just depends on what situation you're in. You know, reacting too fast, reacting too slow, it's too hard to say, but it is interesting the way the mind works, especially when you say things like, you can know that something's there without being able to perceive it. I think that's a very real part of the way that the brain works for everyone, that maybe you and I have gotten to experience a little bit more vividly. But it's true for everyone on some level, that like you have these intuitions in addition to your actual sensory experiences. And in my view, the intuitions are actually what's driving you more than what you actually see. Like people say seeing is believing, but really I think you believe
what you see.
I think that seeing doesn't matter when you don't believe. Like, and if you believe something else, this is well documented. If you believe something very like super strong, super confidently, then seeing counter evidence just strengthens that belief. It's not going to debunk it for you. So, I don't know. There's this kind of ebb and flow. But I feel like an experimentalist on accident. I'm not trying to, right? But I feel like it's cool to get to see things at the bleeding edge, or see things that are unusual, but they are true. You know, yeah. And through dreams, you can see. So I dream, but I don't dream as often as I used to, and it's almost always positive. I haven't had a nightmare in like probably over a year. Ones. Yeah, they're all amazing. They're all like, you know, save the world type of stuff, just deep wisdom. You know, I get to kick it with Gandhi or something.
Oh, dude, I wish I had those. Because I don't know if I
almost feel bad telling you this.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm having nightmares because I know I've been super stressed. I don't know if that's just my mind, like hey, dude, get some more stress, you know, kind of thing. Yeah. But I wish I was like kicking it with Gandhi, Snoop Dogg, and the whole crew, you know.
Well, Snoop Dogg might be a little bit of a nightmare depending on what you're into.
How would he be a nightmare?
Well, Snoop is he's a cool character because he was kind of marketed like the same way that YG is marketed now. Like he's super gang affiliated guy when he was when he was younger, and now he's seen more as a laid back kind of daddy, you know, dad type of guy, smooth guy. But man, that guy, you know. Basically, what I'm saying is there's a real growth over time,
like maturity.
Kind of maturity, and like a value of a lot of those softer things.
Obviously,
that
I wasn't
a gang dude wouldn't value.
Obviously, I wasn't around during the time where Snoop Dogg was like gangster or whatever.
Yeah.
But at least now I see him exactly what you're saying, like very chill. I watched those interviews with what is it called? Narwhal.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And he interviews Snoop Dogg, and I love it. I remember one where he Snoop Dogg is like, "Is it okay if I roll a joint?" And he starts rolling it, and then he starts microwaving it. And I was like, "Wait, what is he doing?" And then he explains it. I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. That's pretty smart, right?" And he's just so chill. And then he's a character, he's a character, and it's and then you have Nardwuar, that's a completely different character, Yeah. And it's like, but they just go great hand in hand. And I can see why they continuously do interviews, And I feel like they have like this cool friendship going on. I'm like, oh, these guys are super dope. I wish I was there in that room with them.
Really?
During the interview, yeah.
With Nardwuar, it always seems like the people are annoyed by it.
Well, not Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg, I feel like he loves
I haven't
him.
seen that many, to be fair. I haven't seen that many of his interviews, but maybe the last one I saw, I don't know. They seemed annoyed.
There are some people that get annoyed with him, and maybe it's because they don't, different energy level or whatever, however you want to see it, right? But there's some people that just love him because he knows so much.
Yeah.
Like he does so much research. I feel like he's not just asking like these superficial questions. He kind of like figures out, what type of favorite cereal do you like and stuff like that. He really gets like where people feel like, okay, this guy. Sometimes some people take it the wrong way. Like, what are you, like FBI? Like some people have mentioned that.
Yeah.
But some people are like, wow, you know that? That's super cool. Like, I don't know, someone would research me kind of thing. And they feel flattered and then they start developing some sort of connection in that short time frame. And then Nardwuar gives them gifts. And it's like, I feel like when he interviews these artists, I feel like their right approach should be like, let him do his weirdness and just accept it and embrace it and accept the gifts and stuff and just be chill with him. And I feel like, at least with the Snoop Dogg interviews, I think those are the most that he has done with like one individual person. Yeah. He's so laid back and chill and just accepts Nardwuar for who he is. Nardwuar accepts him for who he is. And they're like the two best bros kind of thing. And it's just like, I'm like, dang, that's super cool. This is interesting. And I wish that they did more. I wish that they just had a show by themselves, Yeah. The Nardwuar / Snoop Dogg show. and just, and I don't know. They could talk about any random thing and I would watch it, man. Wow. They could talk about, back to the chicken wings, making the best chicken wing ever. I would totally watch it. I would watch them just talk about paint drying, I would totally watch it because I think that they could make it interesting.
What do you know about Snoop's show?
He's done a couple, right?
Internet show, GGN.
I think I've seen a couple. It's because it became kind of like a meme, like little memes came out of it.
I have no idea.
I think I remember seeing one where I don't know if my memory serving me right, but it was like Snoop Dogg with some other rappers, and they were like talking about, I don't know if it was like sneakers or something, and I was like, this is interesting, right? But not as interesting as the Nardwuar / Snoop Dogg.
Yeah, as far as the research, I mean, Nardwuar is up there.
Yeah.
And it's a very specific brand. If you like it, you probably love it.
Yeah, and I just love it. And then the pose that he does at that, it's like, it feels so crazy and chaotic, but so polished at the same time. It's like this good mix. Yeah. And it's like, wow, And then Snoop Dogg, he's like this other character, and I've seen some of the stuff that he talks about. Like, I think stuff that happens to him is kind of funny. I remember once where they were talking about, I don't know if it was exactly with Nardwuar. It was maybe with someone else. He's talking about his experience where they hadn't played like some new Call of Duty game or something at the time, and he just wanted to like smoke a joint and stuff. And like, I don't know if I'm getting the story right, but it's like probably they were not cool with that. So it's like, it's just funny seeing them try to put Snoop Dogg in some like weird situations kind of thing, Because like anyone that does any basic research on him, they know that he smokes. Yeah. He does music. That's just like, his character, you know?
Right.
He's gonna speak his mind. He's gonna say what he wants, and he seems like a very genuine guy, kind of polite. At least that's how he comes off to me. He's just cool, you know. And if you mess with his flow, he's not cool anymore with that kind of thing, you know. And I'm like, why would they make him play a video game? Maybe he plays video games. I don't know. You know, he can do his own thing. I don't care. But it's like don't throw him in some weird spots where he can't be himself, kind of thing.
Yeah. He agreed to do some interview where he's playing video games?
I'm assuming, no. I think maybe, I don't know much about his personal life, but I'm assuming like his manager or something got him a gig. Probably, you know, with money. It's like, hey, dude, I want to do this quick thing. You play some quick video game, get some quick cash kind of thing. I done those before. Like, well, not at his level, but like, I remember going in the Swami. He's like, want to watch this trailer for the movie and tell us your opinion for $1 or something? I'm like, oh yeah, you know?
Yeah, but that's, I mean, the average person who has to worry about their finances, that's one thing. If you're already pretty established.
Yeah, that's true. You could have said, hell no.
You don't have to pick up some silly thing.
But at the same time, it's kind of cool. Maybe he was just like,
maybe
curious.
he wants to.
I wish I could see into his mind and see how he thinks. It'll be interesting. Yeah. Same thing with Narwhal and all these other guys. Like, it's interesting. I just find it like very intriguing kind of thing. Even like talking to you, I want to get into your mind and just see how you see things, your perspective.
Yeah. Well, my perspective's not that hard to understand. It's pretty boring. It's basically it goes back to a lot of the chef stuff, but the beginning is that everybody's going to die. That's like the first thing you got to understand my perspective.
I agree with it. Yeah.
The second thing is, okay, so what are you going to do while you're alive? And that I think is the beginning of my obsession with prototyping. It's that a part of it is, on one hand, you can train somebody to do something specific. But if you train them how to generally think and solve problems, it's going to do a lot more than get them a job or this or this or that. It's a life skill, because in life, you have to decide what you're going to do and you have to do it. You have to persevere through stuff. So the same skills that you're building when you're prototyping, when you're cooking, right? That's what you have to do in general as a human, period. And I think if you understand that and you accept that as a basic reality of our existential truth of like, this is what's going on right now, then that's all you have to understand my perspective. Why chefs? Why sheep? Why do a podcast? Why live in the domes? Why do this? Why do that? Well, it's all the same thing, which is that you have to come up with some way of living. And what most people arguably do is they just download whatever way of living from the people who came before them. And to a large extent, that's what I do. But there's also new options. There's also new paths that you can go down. And you shouldn't be hesitant to explore those. Maybe the thing worth doing for you, like your little mini wheel, right? Or mini, I forgot what you call it, mini pottery. Yeah, pottery wheel. Yeah. Sometimes the most optimal solution for what you want is not already out there. So you have to have the skill to actually bring it into reality in order to complete your meal. And if your meal is different than somebody else's, that's perfectly fine. In fact, you should expect that if you're a real chef. If you're actually cooking, you're prototyping. Not because you want to, because you have to as a life skill. And as soon as you stop doing that, to me, that just means you're cooking somebody else's meal, which is okay, but it's not the most optimal way to live. So that's basically the summary of my perspective. Is that
you started saying that it was a boring perspective? I'm like,
it's boring because it's all the same thing. You're just doing one thing, cooking, and then you die. You live, you're born, you cook, and then you die.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But the details of what that is for each person is going to be different. And you have to learn, first of all, what's the same about all of them connects everyone. And what's different makes you unique. And both of those are positive things.
No, I see your perspective as interesting. No, it's exciting. It's not boring. I think it's the opposite. Because the cooking is different.
It's exactly. Every chef must cook. Chefs keep cooking. But what, like you personally, what that means for you personally could be wildly different. For me, it means I got to talk to people. For somebody else, it means working in an oil field. You know what I mean? But that's for them. And this is for me. For you, it involves your mini pottery wheel. That's not for me.
Yeah.
If I were to do the exact same project, it wouldn't be nearly as fulfilling for me.
And what do you get out of talking to people? Like, how is that fulfilling to you?
Yeah, no. So basically, I get a better model of what people are like. So a big part of my psychology is I grew up without my parents. So I was raised by my aunt and my uncle. And as I was kind of going through elementary school, I would observe other people interacting with their parents. And my reaction to that, and everybody reacts differently, but my reaction to that was like, man, I'm so glad I'm not living with my parents. Not any down thing to them, but because I felt like, because I didn't automatically feel attached to any adult, I had the option of picking from any adult for who I wanted to be my mentor. So I personally feel like my mentor, I always had like 5 or 6 mentors at every point in my life because I just gravitated toward people who had skills that I cared about. And sometimes it was, family members, my aunt, my uncle, whatever. But most of the time, it was just like kind of random people that were just adults. And for whatever reason, they were willing to put up with me. So a big part of my childhood was like learning how to be a great mentee. So I see it as like there's competition for, if you use the analogy of students and teachers, the great teachers want good students and the good students want good teachers, but there's several good teachers and several good students. So there's like this kind of ebb and flow of competition for like, can I get with the greatest teacher that I can get with? And then for the teachers, well, can I get the best students that I can get? And there's a balancing point. And one of the things that I felt like not being around my parents allowed me to do was I saw this ebb and flow since I was in like 2nd grade. And since I cared about it that early on, by the time I was in like middle school or high school, I would just run laps around people because the way that I move through the world is very much like, I need to cook. So similar to you finding that wood shop person, that's so much of the challenge. The challenges are really like, can I find mentors? Can I develop skills? But the order is, can I develop skills? Can I find mentors? Because like you, when you develop skills, you become a better candidate for your specific mentors. So the ebb and flow is like, if you do what you want to do as hard as possible, you attract the people who are looking for those character traits in their mentees. And if you can do that, if you can keep that game going, then you're always going to have a mentor.
That's super cool.
Yeah. So again, you just cook. That's the solution. It's always cook harder. It's always step your chef game up is always the solution, basically.
What I'm really digging about your perspective, in your personal situation, I see how you took something that maybe, the normal person that does, have a mom and a dad.
Yeah.
If they were to get stripped of that, they would see it as a negative. But the
and
way
I probably did for a while before all of this, but yeah.
But I see how you can turn it into a positive, and I like that, Yeah. I like that idea that exactly like you explained, you can pick and choose.
You can choose,
Pick and choose your own adventure kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like everyone else has an assigned mentor.
Yeah.
I'm a free agent.
Yeah.
So anybody who's down to help me, they're on my team. Whereas for other people, that's still true. But there's a buffer because they still default to their parents. Whereas to me, there's no buffer at all. As soon as I find a better mentor, if they're willing to have me, that's it. And that's kind of dictated my growth. And it's been very cool to be able to do that. And the extreme examples are from jail. So I went to jail as a college educated person. So
Can I ask at what age? Like how long ago? Like
this was in 2015. So I was 21, 22, maybe probably 22. And of course, jail is like largely where the people who don't have high school diplomas and don't want them That's the majority of the population in jail. People overwhelmingly are, getting ready to go to prison. In fact, one of the weird things is prison, by most inmates, is seen as better than jail, even though it's the place where you go if you have, felonies. And because apparently they say, and, who knows what the motivation for this is, but they say that the conditions are better because it's designed for people to live there. So people do life in prison, but jail is only for 1 year. I mean, now it's different in California because there's overpopulation. Some people serve prison sentences in jails, but generally speaking, jails are for 1 year or less. Prisons are for 1 year or more. So people say the conditions are slightly better. I don't know. I didn't go to prison. But when I went in, this mentality of like, I am already good at finding mentors and not really compromising is very helpful because you're less desperate. Like even though I had no street knowledge, I mean, I was crazy. That was what I had going for me. But I didn't really know anything about the world of the streets. I was just a college student who lost his mind and then ended up there. There are a lot of things about being kind of open to whatever is being offered and understanding the mentor-mentee relationship that made things really easy for me. Even though I didn't know anybody and even though it was actually a potentially dangerous place. One of the crazy things is I saw this guy get jumped. And
what was the reason?
I don't know. To this day, I still don't know. And he and his cousin or something, he and whoever he came in with got jumped. But they were only there for 2 days. And they were like street guys, They were involved in a bunch of criminal activity before. They had been to jail before. And I had been there for maybe 2 months. And I'm watching this guy get his face stomped out. And I'm just thinking like, how bad do you have to mess up to where the guy who went to college studying advanced I was a math dude in college. I was doing linear algebra on winter break. How is it that guy is better at surviving in jail than you? And I realized there's a lot to say about adaptability that came from those earlier years that, I just didn't realize that other people weren't developing in that way.
Maybe these variables just lined up and he created the perfect.
He pissed some people off, but he wasn't able to undo it. You might get people annoyed, but there's got to be some, there's usually some options. Unless he was a snitch, then there's no option. But how would anybody know that you were a snitch? You know what I mean? There's got to be something that you've done to out yourself. Anyhow, one of the weird things is I started rapping in jail, and
did other people enjoy it or?
Yeah, people really enjoyed it. What I was going to say is there's producers there. First of all, obviously there are rappers, but there are people who produce music and they're like, it might not be a bad thing for you to actually try to make money rapping. You know that, right? That's an option, right? And I'm like, yeah, but I like doing stuff for fun, I like the purity of it. For me, it's like journaling. And you realize after, there are people who are willing to fight for me. Why? Because of stupid stuff. You know what I mean? I remember one time there was this older guy and we were all sitting down at a table and there's seniority rules for chairs. And he's like, I didn't really give a fuck about the seniority rules, but I had been there for long enough so that I had a chair. I had a spot at the table. And I said, man, if you want to just sit in my chair, it's fine. I don't really give a fuck. And he came up to me and he said, I really respect what you did there. I like how you're looking out for your elders. And I said, yeah, it doesn't fucking matter, but, for what it's worth, thanks. And then later on, I ended up getting moved to another facility. That guy was in the other facility. And he was like, oh, yeah, I remember this guy. And I went out for a walk because I go for strolls, I like to think things through. And this guy was like, I'll shadow you. And I was like, yeah, I mean, not really necessary. I don't have a problem with anybody or anything, but thanks. He's like, no, I got you. And then from then on, he was like my goon for the until I left, which was weird. But it was a situation where it was like, well, I think what has happened is he is interested in a certain kind of a community lifestyle where people watch each other's back. And he sees me as someone who's a great candidate for that because I gave him a chair. Did I want to sign up for anything? No. But these are the small little things that it turned out. Now, if there would have been a riot, it would have been a big deal that I had someone looking out for me. Mm-hmm. So luckily there wasn't. But I feel like there are a lot of kind of small examples that I probably didn't even pick the best, where it's like viewing the world in terms of like, I have the things I want to do and I'm just going to do those things as well as I can possibly do them. And then hopefully I'll recruit some mentors who value whatever I'm doing.
The way I see the story that you said, it's like that random act of kindness, or at least maybe that's how he viewed it.
Yeah.
He took it and then looked at you and kind of like his interpretation of you was what he kind of like that's what he values in life, like
right.
So it's like I heard it before from older people, like having the sense of the senior, the older one, the wise one gets respected by the younger ones, and it's a cool dynamic in a way, the whole sensei and then the student, kind of like how you were mentioning, before.
Yeah.
And maybe he just thought you were a pretty dope guy. And that reminds me of a story. I have like this kind of like a dark story that I'm going to tell you. My dad tells me, he says that when he was younger, he was down in Mexico and he got a job at this place where they would can like jalapenos and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they would also they would ship. He would just load pallets onto trucks, and they had jalapenos and sodas and shit like that. And he says that he was on the way to work. He was just pushing this dolly with a bunch of sodas, and he saw that there was this like homeless guy out there, right? And they were selling these things called tortas, which is like you know what torta is, right? You're from California. And they were selling tortas, and this guy was just kind of like looking, and my dad says that he went and bought one, and he was about to bite it, and this homeless guy was just looking at him. My dad felt like so bad for him. He's like, fuck, like he's hungry, man. Like he couldn't live. He couldn't enjoy it with this guy staring at him. Yeah. So he went up to the guy. He's like, hey, do you want half of it? Like, I'm willing to share because I'm hungry, I'm going to share half of it with you. And he's like, and see my stack of sodas? Like, you can take one from the bottom. Like, my company won't notice, My boss won't notice. So he goes and he takes one of the sodas from the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
And then he breaks, he rips the torta in half, gives it to the guy. And the guy eats it, drinks the soda. And my dad, he had his quick lunch. Then he takes the little dolly full of sodas. My dad said that some time went by. He never disclosed how long. And there was this one day where he was walking towards work, and the homeless guy appears, and he starts telling my dad, "Hey, go buy yourself a cup of coffee." I was like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah.
The guy's like, "Go buy yourself a cup of coffee right now." My dad's like, "Why?" He's like, "Go," and the homeless man hands him the money. Go buy yourself a cup of coffee right now. My dad's like, dude, what the hell? Like, why?
Yeah.
And he says that he just punched this guy punched my dad. Like, go buy right. I'm telling you, just go in there, buy your cup of coffee. My dad's like, this guy's fucking crazy, you know? Like, I don't know why he's doing. So my dad, he said that he went into the coffee shop and the homeless guy was just staring at him. My dad's like, okay, this is freaky. And he was like much older and stronger. So my dad's like, he's a little spooked. He's like, I'm just going to hang out in this coffee shop. I'm going to drink the coffee. And when he's not looking, I'm just going to run out and go back to work,
Yeah.
My dad said that he was just drinking the coffee and then he fell asleep. Because he was just waiting. He was a little sleepy. Fell asleep. And when he woke up, he saw that there was like police and stuff like that outside.
Yeah.
What ended up happening when my dad found out, was that the place where he was loading up the pallets full of jalapenos and stuff, they actually had drug inside the things. What ended up happening that day was some guys showed up with machine guns and they killed all the people inside the warehouse, even the truck drivers, and they stole all the drugs, all the canned jalapenos.
Holy shit!
So this guy saved my dad's life. This guy was in on it. He was out there stalking the whole thing. He knew everything. The attack, this homeless guy, he was not homeless.
Jesus Christ.
My dad was like, holy fuck. If I hadn't bought this guy, like giving him half my torta and a soda, I would have been dead.
Yeah.
You know?
That's insane.
That's insane. Probably, my dad has told me, he's like, maybe this guy just saw that, I didn't deserve that kind of faith or something.
Damn.
And then, he just saw something in me that's like.
Yeah, that's pretty wild, man. That's.
Yeah. My dad said that once that happened, he fucking bolted out of there. Like, he didn't show up again to work. Or, well, obviously, he's not gonna come back.
No, there's no reason.
He said that it was wild.
A safe work environment.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
But it's scary that, some guy out there in plain sight was not who he was,
Yeah.
He was like some lurker, some shadow man,
Shadow man.
And in a way, he was like my dad's guardian angel.
He is.
Angel of death and a guardian angel. He was both.
Damn. Well, to some, he's an angel, and to others, he's a demon.
Yeah. Exactly.
All over
the Star Beast, right?
He is the Star Beast. Yeah. Damn.
Yeah, my dad said that, and he was just like, he felt like the guy saved his life, Yeah,
he did. And definitely saved his life.
And now he quickly he knew that if the guy would have said you can't go over there, they're gonna shoot up the place, my dudes or whatever.
Yeah.
It was like it would compromise the whole thing,
Yeah.
And so it's like maybe this guy was an expert at doing this type of shit, hiding. It wasn't his first rodeo kind of thing. Yeah. Freaky. My dad said that he doesn't remember how the guy looked. It was so crazy. It was a blur,
Yeah.
It's crazy as hell.
Wow. That's amazing.
So it's kind of almost similar, obviously not that it's an extreme, but it's
well, that's luckily that didn't have to ever happen.
But with you, the guy saw a quality in you. Maybe same thing with my dad's story. He saw a quality in him that just kind of clicked, right?
Yeah.
This guy's dope. I like his energy. I like who he is, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I want him to continue to exist, kind of thing.
Although there is another side to the whole thing that I think is more close to where I am now, which isn't so much about mentorship as it is colleagues or that's not the right word, collaborations. So with the mentor, the mentor's above you, but with the collaboration, you're just you want to work with people, and I feel like I'm largely building up for collaborations more now at this point in my life than I am mentors, because it's there might not be anyone who knows how to do the one thing that I want to do. Mentorship works more when somebody already understands the ins and outs and they're teaching you.
What do you want to do? What's your mission?
Yeah, I would say, well, I'm playing around with this idea that culture is free.
Culture is free? What do you mean by that?
That it's free if you're born into it. So what I mean is, if you're born into a wealthy family, then you get to learn about money management for free. Or if you're born into a culture that values rhythm, then you get to learn a lot of things related to timing without ever having to fight for it.
That almost sounds like, this is going to be super nerdy what I'm about to say, but some of the role-playing games, tabletop, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
I used to play Pathfinder with a friend down in San Diego, and this is where I'm going to draw the connection. there's different classes, like different races. Mm-hmm. And for example, the half elves, because they're elf and they're half human, because the elf part lets them see in low light conditions. Mm-hmm. So they have low light vision, which is great if you're entering like a place like a dungeon and you might have a torch, so it's like low light. They can see a little bit clearer, more than just a regular human. So they get like an added buff just for how they were born, kind of thing.
Exactly.
And then you have other characters like, and each one has different. There's some races that have dark vision. So if it's completely pitch black, they can clearly see.
Yeah.
And it's just like these little buffs, as they call, or these little unique traits. Mm-hmm. It just makes the game a little bit more interesting. And so I completely see what you going back to the real world, not the fantasy board games, but I completely see it. Well, and different cultures, there's different things that they value, and you get to learn that set of skills or that belief and stuff, and you could potentially exploit it in a positive way. I don't mean in a negative, right? And embrace it, and then go off and do something interesting with it, or cool, or something that would benefit others or yourself. Any way you want. So I completely see it. I now I'm starting to wonder in my culture what's the bonus? What's the Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah.
bonus that I have with Do I got dark vision, or what do I have? Right.
Yeah.
I'm starting to think. What do you think? What do you think I would have, or what do you?
Idea.
What do you think you have? From your culture, like what do you think?
Lots of things that deal with the arts, and I think that the arts are important because they're a universal language. So I think that a lot of what I have that's free is that I can speak a universal language without trying that hard.
What type of art are you speaking about?
So one of the more interesting ones is dance. Because dance doesn't even involve words. So I think it's something that's very powerful, that can give out a specific type of mood, and it involves rhythm, which I think is very important and very intricate and deep, dare I say. I mean, in general, I think that there's a connection between differential equations and rhythm that I haven't fully figured out, but when it is fully written out, you can learn a lot about high-level math stuff through rhythm. I think. I don't know.
Maybe it's how it flows, like through math, the process. Maybe that would be my best guess, Yeah. And I would see, like, in dance, there's a rhythm to it. Mm-hmm. Certain steps that you take, Mm-hmm. Math, you take steps. Dance, you
can look at sequences of things and say
or a pattern or something.
Yeah, there's definitely a connection between rhythm and not integers. What's it called?
Maybe you could even break down dance mathematically.
Well, that's the thing. For sure you can, but how to do it, I haven't really worked it out yet. But that's something, as far as a moonshot, that's something I think I could figure out easily within the next 10 years. So my point is, I think that just like, so in the information revolution, information through things like Wikipedia that used to be, you had to go, it was very hard to get to it, but it was known, it's just it wasn't easy to access. It suddenly became a lot more accessible. And I think culture is a form of information that currently is still somewhat difficult to access, but making it easier to access, making tools, cultural tools, whether it's mental processes, rules of thumb, although rules of thumb, hopefully, I don't really value that much, but like rules and their implications. Every culture has some very valuable ways of storing certain rules and what follows from those rules. And a lot of them overlap, obviously. Be nice to people is a simple rule pretty much every culture has, because reciprocation in the long term, it's generally good to be nice until someone is mean to you and then be mean to them. tit for tat. I think that's what it's called. But anyhow, there's these certain rules that people learn, and there's these certain ways of learning things and certain processes that, like Wikipedia, they're still in the encyclopedia. But a lot of those things, I think, could be made more open, and I think it would help the next generation coming up to have easier access to not just information, but cultural information that's very valuable outside of the culture. So if you're not born in the culture where it's free to you or it's easy for you, I think there should be a way for you to still get those gems. And as the moonshot, I'm interested in playing a role in that part of human development. Of saying like, okay, we had the information, we're in the information revolution, but specifically cultural information, I think is even more valuable than Wikipedia.
So like sitting someone down and just teaching them about a culture?
No, to say that what a culture is basically like a word in a language. It's just a combination of letters. But to teach people the alphabet would be the best, so that they can understand the words, but they could also make their own words. It's like you're giving them the ultimate toolkit to remix, to basically create their own culture.
I feel like, I don't know if I'm being pessimistic right here.
Yeah,
but I feel like culture is kind of like, obviously you have your own culture, but if you're trying to get someone else to like learn yours, it's a difficult task. It's like,
if you don't have an alphabet.
Yeah, maybe.
But with an alphabet, it's just like learning another word.
Because it's like, right now, what was popping in my mind is like, what do you gain from culture? And culture, there's so much stuff, you know? Obviously,
well, I suspect there's actually not that much stuff. I suspect that there's a lot of redundancy.
Maybe there's stuff that a lot of cultures share, and it's just like, just this basic model kind of thing. But at the same time, no, there's all this other stuff. One of the things that I can think of off the top of my head is jokes. Even like, there's some jokes or sayings that I can say in Spanish that not all Spanish speakers get, you know? It's just a cultural thing. Like, are your parents like from Mexican descent? What area do they get certain jokes? I've spoken to other people that speak Spanish, like from Chile and stuff like that. Sometimes they don't get some jokes. Or they'll tell me one joke, and I get it, even though they're using a completely different word or a word I never heard before. But the way it sounds and it fits in the context, I'm like, wait, I heard that joke before, and this is how we say it. And then we all crack up because it's like, it's the same shit, you know. Yeah. So there is like repetition, but at the same time, there's certain things that maybe someone from another culture that just speaks English, like, they're not going to get these jokes at all.
Well, I would argue that the reason why they don't get the jokes is because we don't have a Wikipedia. We only have an encyclopedia.
What would you put in this, like, cultural pedia, as I'm calling it? What would you put, like, how would you begin to even start creating one? What's the start?
That's a great question.
Like, or are you going to start putting, like, okay, this is, I'm going back to my culture, like the Chicano culture, SoCal, and then like, this is what the stuff that we eat, these are our jokes. Like, it would be kind of like listed like that. No, no,
it would be super reductive. It would be like a physics book, super reductionistic. So, what fundamentally is a joke? That's where we would start, and then say
something that makes people laugh.
Maybe. But that's what the approach would be. It wouldn't be specific to any culture. It's like saying, what is a smile?
The muscles moving. Obviously, I'm answering it now.
Yeah, it has more to do with
there's a certain structure.
The muscles in a human face than it has to do with where you're born.
Yeah, we share like smiles. That's an interesting thing.
But I would argue we also share jokes. It's just not obvious that we share jokes.
Okay. Could you give an example?
A rough thing would be a joke involves something that is broken in a way that the listener the listener has to know that something is broken. So if it's broken, but the listener doesn't understand what's broken, then they're not going to understand the joke.
What do you mean by broken? Like,
that there's the norm, there's whatever is the expected connection of ideas, and then there's something that's off from the norm.
And that's supposed to be the funny?
It at least has to have that in order for it to be a joke. Now, I don't know if that's actually true for a joke.
I remember, growing up, one of the channels that I loved watching was Comedy Center. And I would watch the stand-up. And I noticed that some of the funniest jokes, at least personally, were the ones that they point out fucked up shit in society or like reality. Especially that.
Well, think about it. If it's pointing out something fucked up, that's the part that's broken. Yeah. The society itself. And the expected thing is that the society is not broken, but it is.
And then everybody has a laugh, but then at the same time, it's like, at that very moment, it's like, yeah, laugh, and you feel good. But then later on, you start thinking about that joke. It's like, fuck, we're so fucked up. Like, how can we fix this? But then at the same time, if you fix it, there's no joke anymore.
Not that joke, but another joke exists. Maybe, All you need to do is find something else, and then
the joke could even be how long it took to fix it.
Yeah, sure.
Like fuck, it's like, hey, it's how many idiots does it take to fix this?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say super reductionistic physics style. Think of it as the alphabet so that now we can all understand the words.
That's pretty cool.
Universal alphabet. It's one of those projects where, there's it's not even close to being started. So anything that I say now, it's probably going to be meaningless a year from now. But when that is the general direction, hopefully it's something in that direction. And again, this is like 10 years.
I would love to see something like that. I want to see you accomplish your goals.
Well, the goal isn't even defined yet, so.
Well, I want to see the progress.
You can see stuff right now that I've already done. So you can listen to my first mixtape, Elmwood Recipes. For when I wrote in jail, first mixtape I wrote.
Can you send me the link and stuff?
Yeah, I can send you a link. I'll send you a link to this and Elmwood Recipes at the same time.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And because it's a classic hip-hop thing. It's very much like stolen beats from YouTube, bars. The stuff I make now is a lot more abstract, but it's still hip-hop, where I'm thinking of doing a Dr. Seuss type of thing over the summer possibly, where all of it's like pretty vague. I put 1 foot in and 1 foot out. I don't know where you're from, I don't know what you're about, or something like that, where it's like, it's pretty open to interpretation. 1 foot in, 1 foot out, what does it mean?
Could be a dance.
Exactly. It could be a dance. It could be a lot of things. It could be me talking about the World Trade Center. Who knows? So, I feel like it's not fresh in my mind, everything that I've done. So that's part of the reason why the website is useful. It's like, well, you could just scroll through, and if anything catches your eye, then that's what it is. But there have been some. There might be. The only time that I've done things that actually are cultural is through the music. So if you read lyrics, then maybe you'd see something that you'd like. Everything else, the comics, there's no words, so you just look at pictures. If you like them, you like them. If not, you don't.
Now I'm curious. I want to.
I feel like you would really like the images. That's the first thing I ever did was the comics, and then the next thing was the music, and then the podcast, and then the math papers, and now I just continue with the music and the podcast. But yeah, I my papers are very much boring, like analytical papers, like they're academic. And I only have a few of them, but the music, you might find something, you might not. I could play my last song for you, not right now though. Actually, speaking of which, I think it might be time to wrap things up. You feel pretty satisfied?
Yeah, this is awesome. Thanks for having me on.
All right.
The podcast.
There's one more challenge though.
Okay.
Which is the most important question in
the most important question in the universe.
Yes, to you. Are you ready?
Yeah. Or you're going to ask it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I thought I had to make come up with one. I was like, oh god.
No, that's too much. That's too much. Spin or flip?
Spend or flip?
Spin or flip?
I like the idea of spinning.
That's right. All right. Now thank you for your time.